Introduction to Middleware in NestJS. Welcome to the lecture on Introduction to Middleware in NestJS. Today we'll be discussing the fundamental concepts of middleware, its capabilities, and how to implement and apply it within NestJS applications. By the end of this lecture, you will have an understanding on how middleware functions and how to effectively use it in your NestJS projects. So what is middleware? Middleware is a function that gets called before the route handler in a web application. Middlewares have access to the request and response objects, as well as the next middleware function in the application's request response cycle. So the next middleware function is commonly called to as next. So middleware can be used to execute code, modify request and response objects, and end the request response cycle, or pass control to the next middleware function. So we're looking at middleware here, which implements Nest middleware from NestJS Common. And middleware can import request response next function from Express. And as you can see, middleware would have access to request, response, and call next. Capabilities of middleware. So middleware functions can perform a variety of tasks. They can execute any code needed during the request response cycle, make changes to the request and response objects. As you can see, we can make changes to request response object, end the request response cycle, and call the next middleware function. So one thing to note is that if the current middleware function does not end the request response cycle, it must call next to ensure the request is passed to the next middleware function. Otherwise, the request will be left hanging. NestJS middleware. So in NestJS, middleware functions are by default equivalent to Express middleware. You can implement custom NestJS middleware in two ways. First, as a function, or second, as a class with the injectable decorator. When using a class, it should implement NestJS Nest middleware interface, whereas functions do not have any special requirements. A class-based middleware example. So let's look at an example of implementing middleware using a class method. Here is an example of creating a logger middleware class that logs incoming requests. So this middleware will be defined in a TypeScript file. As you can see, logger.middleware.ts. And the class will be decorated with injectable, which makes it part of the NestJS dependency injection system. Logger middleware example code. So we can see that we're importing the necessary modules from NestJS Common and Express. So this is something to keep in mind. Dependency injection. So NestJS middleware fully supports dependency injection, allowing you to inject dependencies available within the same module. So this is achieved through the constructor, similar to how providers and controllers handle dependency injection. So this feature is especially useful when your middleware requires access to services or other dependencies. Applying middleware. So middleware is not directly placed in the module decorator. Instead, it is set up using configure method, as you can see here, of the module class. And modules that include middleware must implement the Nest module interface. So you can see that we have export class, implement Nest module. So just kind of continuing on, you can see that we have the middleware consumer. We have set logger middleware for the cats route handler defined in the cat controller, and the configure method uses the middleware consumer to apply the logger middleware to the specified routes. Restricting middleware to specific methods. You can also further restrict middleware to a specific request method by passing an object containing the route path and request method to the for routes methods. Here, what we are doing is we're limiting the logger middleware to only handle get requests for the cats route. Middleware consumer. So the middleware consumer is a helper class. Here you can see we're importing from NestJS common that provides several built-in methods to manage middleware. These methods can be chained in a fluent style. So the for routes method can take a single string, multiple string, route info objects, a controller class, or multiple controller class. Applying middleware to controllers. So instead of specifying routes as strings, you can apply middleware directly to controllers. So here we can see that we're applying the logger middleware to all routes defined in the cats controller. Excluding routes. Sometimes you may want to exclude certain routes from having the middleware applied. The exclude method allows you to specify routes that should be excluded. Here, if you look at this example, we are excluding get and post requests for cats route and any route matching the pattern cats star. Functional middleware. For simpler middleware that doesn't require dependencies, you can define it as a function instead of a class. This is called functional middleware. So if we were to convert our logger middleware that we saw from a class-based to a functional middleware. This will be how it's gonna look like. And you can apply functional middleware in the same way as class-based middleware. Here, we're applying the logger function, which is functional middleware, to the cats controller. Multiple middleware. In order to bind multiple middleware that are executed sequentially, you need to provide a comma separated list inside the apply method. You can see in this example, we are applying course, helmet, and logger middleware to the cats controller. Global middleware, if you want to bind middleware to every registered route at once, you can use the use method provided by Nest application instance, and this method is called in the main application file, main.ts. Using middleware with wildcards, so pattern-based routes are supported using wildcards. So, for example, the asterisk can be used to match any combination of characters. Here we have AB asterisk CD route that will match ABCD, ABECD, or any character here, so on. Important notes. So some important notes to keep in mind. Express and Fastify handle middleware differently. So you want to make sure to read the documentation for each. If you are using the Express adapter, which is the default adapter for NestJS, NestJS registers JSON and URL encoded middleware from the body parcel package by default. In order to customize this middleware, you need to disable the global middleware by setting the body parser flag to false when creating the application with Nest Factory create. Summary. To give you a summary, middleware in NestJS provides a powerful way to handle requests and responses, execute code, and inject dependencies. By understanding how to implement and apply middleware, you can enhance the functionality of your NestJS application. Thank you everyone for listening.